Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. It's a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 24th of July 2024. Lots to go through, so we'll start where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, and you can find them in the description to the video below. Of course, please remember there are Dell's statistics and Bill's dashboard that sit there and help. Well, don't just sit there actually. Particularly Dell adds to them every day, and they are really a really important part of what hopefully we provide here. Check out the links in the description below. 1,140 personnel lost, and that is what we've seen it for the last couple of days after it's ticked back up to over 1,000. 14 tanks is now a significant uptick from yesterday's numbers, and 13 APV slightly below the daily average. 65 artillery systems is a huge number there. So that's well above 3, that's almost 4 times the daily average, isn't it? Anti-aircraft warfare systems, one of those has been taken out. We have one aircraft which has been clearly visually evidenced to have been shot down by a Stinger. 77 vehicles and fuel tanks, very high in that category, and 10 pieces of special equipment. So some really difficult numbers for the Russians there. 14 tanks is a large number of tanks to lose in a day. Now, we have 2 days worth of Andrew Perpetua's stats to go through. I should have done a separate video yesterday. He says, here are the losses I could identify for yesterday. That was actually on in the morning on the 23rd. Russian losses include the first documented loss of an M46 howitzer, really old, a destroyed T-80BV and T-80BVM, 7 destroyed infantry fighting vehicles, and a Yastreb AV. So I talked to you about the Yastreb being $250 million worth of kit. Okay, so you can see that just in terms of raw equipment, not looking particularly at combat assets, that's about a 3, maybe a 4 to 1, probably a 3 to 1 loss ratio, at least maybe 3.5. And then we have this just coming out recently, and I don't know, what is that, 6 to 1, 7 to 1, 8 to 1 loss. It's an absolutely phenomenal set of losses there. And actually, when you look at the combat losses, it's super impressive for the Ukrainians. So goodness me, 2 huge lists to go through. And before we do that, there's been this very big interview in the Guardian newspaper, first foreign interview of General Syrski, Alexander Syrski, and he talks about losses. We won't talk about the personnel at the moment, but I'm going to go to the claim that the ratio of equipment losses are at 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, if I find that in here. So we have, when it comes to equipment, there's a ratio of 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 in their favor. He said since 2022, the number of Russian tanks has doubled from 1,700 to 1,300 to 3,500. So I just want to point out that some people have reported this as an equipment loss. That is just the number of pieces of equipment. The equipment losses are, I think, way in Ukraine's favor and have been consistently shown to have been the case over time. Indeed, that we'll look at, say, the Pokrovsk region in a minute. So let's go to that first sheet and we'll look at the Ukrainian losses first. So we have, the quality on that is not good. I wonder why that is. Just the resolution of that screen grab is not very good. Anyway, sorry about that. So Ukrainian losses, artillery, some M777s, some older howitzers, a B-21 Grad, multiple launch rocket system damage there. If you look at the damage to destroyed ratio, it's in favor of damage for artillery, as it often is, especially when you've got towed artillery being targeted. It's very difficult to outright destroy that. M1 Abrams abandoned. That's another Abrams. I wonder how many they got left, because they were supposedly given 31. There were rumors that that was going to be doubled. I don't know if it was. It might be the sort of thing that happens and you don't really know about. But they seem to have lost a fair number of those now. Infantry fighting vehicles, a Rosomak, a Polish provided one, and a BMP-2, and a Max Pro MRAP. So nothing too significant in that list. And when we go to the Russian list, a huge amount of surveillance and comms equipment taken out, a Yastreb AV radar. So that alone overcomes all of the Ukrainian losses. That one radar, $250 million worth of kit. And then we have some old bits of artillery coming down into tanks, 5 tanks there, Ranger tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, mainly destroyed as opposed to damaged, BMP 1s and 2s and BTRs as well. Some APCs, Kamaz trucks and other trucks, a few quads, well, a quad and a golf buggy, Desert Cross 1000-3, a bunch of motorcycles, loafs, Scooby-Doo vans, more motorcycles, more loafs, pickup loafs, flatbed loafs, and trucks and whatnot. Okay, so loafs being the bukanka, that's literally what it means because it looks like a loaf of bread in the shape it is on the Scooby-Doo vans. So lots of equipment lost there. That's a very bad day for the Russians, both in terms of mass and the high value of that radar particularly. Okay. Now let's look at the latest list and, oh, good, nice, clean shot here. So we look at the Ukrainian losses, nothing too much else. The first Dingo 2 I've seen, mine resistant ambush protection vehicle there. M113, a couple of those, Max Pro. Okay, nothing too serious. And when we look at the Russians, it's just a huge, massive equipment. Plus, Su-25, another book. That's a book being taken out by another HIMARS attack, or GIMLRS, Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System. So they've lost several books over several days. We are seeing this just gradual attrition of the Russian air defences ahead of F-16s being brought to the front. Though it's worth noting in the Guardian article, he says that the F-16s won't be brought 40 kilometres closer than 40 kilometres away from the front line. So, yeah, they are still going to be trying their hardest to make sure that there are no threats from Russian air defence units. Electronic warfare equipment and comms equipment and recovery vehicle. They've had their own multiple launch rocket system destroyed there. A number of other howitzers, including supposedly an M46, although I don't know where that is here. Anyway, lots of D1 there, goodness me. Right, okay. Tanks, a large number of tanks on this list. I mean, really, really significant. Mainly T62s, T80, T72s as well. The usual list, variants of the tanks there. Most of them destroyed and abandoned as opposed to damaged. And infantry fighting vehicles, a long list there, and almost all of them destroyed or damaged. Destroyed or abandoned. They're the worst types, because abandoned, generally it'll be destroyed later or it gets captured, right? So abandoned is as good as destroyed usually. It's very rare that you get an abandoned vehicle recovered by the side that's lost it. It does happen, but it's not too common. So destroyed and abandoned them, almost all of the IFVs in that state, and that's bad news for the Russians. BMP 1s, 2s, some BTRs, etc., and AFV and some APCs there. Most of those destroyed and abandoned, all but one APC, and there's a BTR 70s, BTR 80s, BTR 50 track guard and shed using an MTLB and a few other MTLBs. So some of these are fairly old vehicles as well. That shows how desperate the Russians are. And then when we get down to golf carts, look at these, all destroyed. Really not looking good for those golf buggies, the Desert Cross 1000-3s. A lot of those lost and a lot of destroyed civilian vehicles. So this is a really bad day at the office. Yesterday, the Yastreb $250 million, and today an air defense, book air defense unit and a Su-25. Goodness me. And then when we look at the Pokrovsk region as a whole, so that's the Avdiivka salient from, I think, are they taking this from the 10th of May, October, when they started attacking there? I don't know. I don't know if they started, whether that's through the whole of the war. Nonetheless, you see that the latest edition here, what have I got? I just had it. It's gone back to the wrong place. Here we are. So the latest counting has the Russians losing 1,485 and the Ukrainians 293. So let's take that as 300 and let's take that as 1,500. That's about 5-1. That's an absolutely shocking tally in that particular region. Now that might be one of the worst regions. If you remember back in October, the Russians were losing equipment hand over fist there. So that is definitely one of the worst areas for them, and that you might not be able to extrapolate those ratios across the front line, but you also might be able to. I mean, goodness me, you look at this loss list here, and you're thinking, yeah, that is how the Russians are operating. Now, this has been up and down recently, but generally, the Russians are losing equipment at a far greater rate than the Ukrainians. Okay, and then let's go back to personnel. So, according to the article in The Guardian, Russia had 100,000. Well, in fact, let's go and read the original source. So, this is the article with Luke Harding. Luke Harding's got an excellent book on Ukraine. I advise you go and read it or listen to it. I listened to it about 6 months ago. Really good. Syrskyi is Ukraine's new commander-in-chief. His unenviable task is to defeat a bigger Russian army. 2.5 years into Putin's full-scale onslaught, he acknowledges the Russians are much better resourced. They have more of everything. That is tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, soldiers. Their original 100,000 strong invasion force has grown to 520,000, he said, with the goal by the end of 2024 being 690,000 men. The figures for Ukraine have not been made public. Quote, when it comes to equipment, there's a ratio of 1-2 or 1-3 in their favour. He said since 2022, their number of Russian tanks has doubled from 1,700 to 3,500. Artillery systems have tripled. The armoured personnel carriers have gone from 4,500 to 8,900. Quote, the enemy has a significant advantage in force resources, Syrskyi said. Therefore, for us, the issue of supply, the issue of quality is really at the forefront. In other words, we need to get more stuff and we need to make sure that we can overcome mass with precision. I keep saying that. It is basically the mantra. So we need better equipment. That means that we can more reliably take their kit out so that the ratio of kit that we destroy compared to what they destroy remains at a really positive status, meaning that we can overcome that ratio of what resources they have to ours. Okay, so later on in the article, overall, Syrskyi sought to put recent setbacks in context. He described Russia's creeping victories as tactical ones. Remember, tactical, operational, strategic. So tactical is like, we need to take that hill and we're going to flank it around there in order to get around that unit, blah, blah, blah. It's a very localized appraisal and situation. Operational might be what's going on the whole of the Pokrovsk region, and what happens if we take this whole town there? How will that affect operationally what's going on in the whole region? And then strategic is like, what's our strategy for the whole war? So it's those three levels, just to remind you. So he's saying that the gains that the Russians are making are tactical. They're not particularly operational or strategic. Local gains rather than operational breakthroughs, such as the capture of a major city. Quote, in principle, the enemy has not made any significant progress, he said. The front line, he added, was 3,700 kilometres long. Active hostilities were taking place across 977 kilometres of it, or twice the length of the border between Germany and France. Russia's successes, meanwhile, came at a staggering human cost. The Kremlin's casualties were 3 times higher than Ukraine's, and even more in certain directions, Syrskyi said. Number of killed is much bigger, he emphasised. In February, Zelensky said 31,000 Ukrainian service personnel had died since 2022. Could Syrskyi update this figure? He declined, saying losses were sensitive and a topic Moscow could exploit. It's pretty definite that Zelensky, when he claimed 31,000, was very much underplaying the number. So that wasn't true. I bet my mortgage on that. But the idea is that there's still, those ratios are better for the Ukrainians and the Russians. Syrskyi contrasted his battlefield tactics with those used by Russian commanders who are... Oh, thank you so much, Ivan. I haven't had a cup of tea today. The number of killed is much bigger, he emphasised. Sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought now. So, yes, Syrskyi contrasted his battlefield tactics with those used by Russian commanders, who are known for sacrificing huge numbers of infantry troops to gain 100 to 200 metres. It's very important, he says, for us to save the lives of our soldiers. We don't defend ruins to the death. And this is super, super important. And we have heard this before. I talked about this before. I had a whole segment. It might have even been a whole separate video I did on basically talking about metrics of success. So what would success look like? How that was it. I think it was to do with the kind of failed counter-offensive in particularly in the south of the Ukrainians last year. But the idea was that the Ukrainians didn't just have territorial gain as their metric of success. right, which the Russians appear to have. They are like, right, all like our number one objective is to take land. The more land we take, the better we are doing, without taking into account the death of their own soldiers. So the Ukrainians take it as a metric of success. If we're going to attack here, yes, we would like to take this land, but we'd also like to minimize our casualties and our success. And same, like if we're being attacked, so if the Russians are on the offensive, then we can succeed by looking at different metrics. Like so this is how, in my opinion, Bakhmut was a success for the Ukrainians. They lost Bakhmut, they lost that territory, but they lost it at huge cost to the Russians. Now, there were some large costs for the Ukrainians, and it did slightly move, the needle moved in the ratios at certain points, but certainly for a large period of the Bakhmut offensive from the Russians, the Ukrainians were holding on, and they were losing men, but the Russians were losing vast numbers of men. And therefore, the loss of Bakhmut was actually arguably a success for Ukraine. It indeed led to the death of Prigozhin fairly directly. Like it was the destruction, essentially, of the Wagner forces by the Ukrainians. The Wagner did take Bakhmut, but they were pretty much decimated. They went back to lick their wounds, and Prigozhin had become increasingly annoyed about that whole military situation and saw this as a reflection of the poor leadership of Gerasimov and Shoigu, and then went to have that kind of mutiny against Shoigu and Gerasimov that ended up with him dying. Okay, but that all came down to effectively a decimation of his forces, and therefore a success of Bakhmut. And so you can measure Bakhmut, for example, in many different ways. Like the death of Prigozhin could be added to the success criteria for the Ukrainians there. So don't just measure things in territory, is the point. And then also, equipment attrition. So you can look at Avdiivka being lost, but the Russians did lose massive amounts of kit. So when you look at these stats, you're thinking, yeah, okay, there was that period where they lost a large amount of land very quickly. They sort of capitulated, the Ukrainians, and that was a bit disastrous. But the overall, it depends where you slice and dice your dates, right? But the overall situation in Avdiivka is that the Ukrainians have attrited the Russian equipment, their resources, at an insane level. Okay, anyway. Russia's successes, meanwhile, came at a staggering human cost. The Kremlin's casualties were 3 times higher than Ukraine's, and even more in certain directions, Sursky said. Their number of killed is much bigger, he emphasised, as sorry to repeat myself, but just that's the point. And sacrificing huge numbers of infantry troops to gain 100 to 200 meters, we don't defend ruins to the death. Okay, he said he was not willing to achieve goals at any cost or to chuck his men into futile meat assaults. Sometimes it was necessary to move to more favourable positions. The classic, we're retreating, moving to more favourable positions. But actually, it's kind of true, but it is a bit of a spin on that. But the point is that, yeah, we'd rather concede territory than lose more men. And human life for the Ukrainians is more valuable to Ukraine than they are to Russia. That is probably both a qualitative assessment, as in there's some kind of intrinsic value that Ukrainians put in their human beings that is over and above what Russia puts in theirs. I think that's prima facie evident by the way that Russia's been conducting the war. But they're also more valuable because they have fewer of them. So there's a kind of a quantitative assessment of that value as well. Sursky contrasted his battlefield tactics with those used by Russian commanders who are known for sacrificing huge numbers of infantry troops to gain 100 to 200 meters. It's very important for us to save the lives of our soldiers. We don't defend... sorry, I keep repeating myself, don't I? Amid skepticism about Ukraine's prospect of achieving outright victory, Sursky noted various positive developments. Actually, before we go on to that, it is worth going back to this idea of meat assault. So Sursky, when he took over, was known as a bit, he's one of his nicknames was a butcher, a bit like the Surovikin the Russian commander who's kind of gone AWOL, because he was known to defend places for too long. Bakhmut was arguably one of those. So it's interesting that he appears to have switched his approach here, and I don't think he's living up to that label as much as people were fearing. I'm sure you could argue that point. F-16s would strengthen Ukraine's air defences. They would allow Kyiv to work more effectively against Russian cruise missiles and to hit ground targets accurately. However, there were limits to what F-16s might achieve, he stressed. They had to remain 40 kilometres or more from the front line because of the risk Moscow would shoot them down. Russia had superior aviation and very strong air defences. Because of this, Ukraine was increasingly turning to unmanned aerial systems, drones. Syrskyi said it used drones very effectively and was trying out, quote, robotic ground systems, land robots that could deliver ammunition or rescue a wounded soldier. There was a new unmanned systems command, the first of its kind. We talked about the leader of that yesterday. We, quote, we fight not by quantity but quality, he said, adding that drones played as big a role as artillery. So interesting nuggets coming out here again. Precision overcomes mass, and drones being the new god of war, effectively. Ukraine's armed forces were successfully using long-range kamikaze drones to strike deep into Russia, he said. So far, they had targeted about 200 critical infrastructure sites. All were connected with military logistics and included factories, fuel dumps, and munition depots. Speedboat-like sea drones, meanwhile, had sunk about a third of Russia's Black Sea naval fleet. It really became a trap for them. For some vessels, a grave, Syrskyi said. So, really interesting article here in The Guardian. I advise you go and read it all, but hopefully picked out a few pertinent points for you. Just a note before I go on sources. I know I sometimes use Max 24 because just an overall kind of appraisal of what's going on, but I don't like the way some people quote articles. So this is, it appears, the quote from Syrskyi from that article, but he's not linked the source of this quote, so that's a big no-no. And he's got this in inverted commas. The key goal of Ukraine is the destruction of the Kerch Road and the railway crossing connecting the occupied peninsula with Russia. Kyiv has a plan to return Crimea, from Syrskyi. And I'm not sure that that's what's said here. So it looks like the quote is actually Harding's own writing. A key Ukrainian objective is to destroy the Kerch Road and rail crossing connecting the occupied peninsula with Russia. Syrskyi declined to say when this might happen. He said Kyiv had a plan to get back Crimea more than a decade after Vladimir Putin illegally annexed it. So on and so forth. But it doesn't, like, Syrskyi did not say what Max 24 claims that he said. And that is basically summarising what Harding said and putting those words in Syrskyi's mouth. Anyway, I know this, I know the way, so I'm still happy to use him as a source, but I do treat him with care. But just as a general point to people using sources on the internet, always demand that they themselves provide their initial sources. Yeah. Okay. But Max 24 does then go on to summarize what was mentioned in the article. It still doesn't link the article. Says that it's from the Guardian, but doesn't actually put a URL. But anyway, we'll move on. Right, so there is quite a bit of footage, well, 2 bits of footage, but it's being spread very widely of the Stinger taking out this, just in case you want to hear that in your blasting out your ears. So that Stinger missile is fired off, and takes out that jet. You can see it from above as well, because later on there was a bit of drone footage that came out of a drone that was above the jet that came down, or not the drone, but the jet came down and exploded on the land below. So that's a Su-25. The pilot did escape and was recovered. So there is that to add to this bit of news. But it is, I think, significant that we are seeing a few planes getting shot down. There was talk about Stingers and other man pads being kind of short on the ground, really, that they needed more of them, and I think they did get some Stingers delivered in one of the packages vaguely recently, I think. But they certainly, I think, need more. And there's talk about UK training up Ukrainians on the Martlet manpad. And I think we've got an article on the Martlet manpad in the military aid video later. Anyway, here we have an interview. HIMARS talks about an interview with Jack Watling. Surprisingly, Dr. Watling, he's of the Royal United Services Institute. I don't always agree with Watling's conclusions. He states that Russia can likely refurbish and produce 1,500 tanks in 2024 and 2025, but recent satellite images suggest that the removal rate from storage has slowed down. In our latest analysis, says HIMARS, of the tank storage bases, we found that only 800 tanks have been removed from visible storage between mid-2023 and mid-2024. 1,500 tanks is not impossible, including BTRZ backlog and new production. But in my opinion, the real number is likely a bit lower. And this is what I've said. I said I disagree with Watling. I think Watling is a bit of a doomer, and he's overstated Russia's ability to refurbish and produce equipment. For 2025, Russia has also faced other challenges. They have been aggressively removing T-72B and T-80 tanks from storage, leaving their stocks of older T-72 models and T-64s largely untouched. Refurbishing these might lead to much lower reactivation rate. So again, what you've got to remember is each successive month is probably going to entail it's you removing more damaged equipment from storage, and therefore it takes longer to fix that up. So when they say that actually the rate of taking tanks from storage has gone down, that's probably a reflection of, well, actually our workshops are taking longer to fix these up, because now we're having to fix up either really old stuff, and trying to get those parts is even more challenging, or they are just fundamentally more degraded as pieces of kit, and the work and time and effort and money being put into them is greater. Right, and the other thing that's doing the rounds at the moment is an assassination attempt on, it's a car bomb in Moscow. It's left the deputy head of the Army Satellite Communication Center fighting for his life. He's reportedly lost both his legs as his Toyota Land Cruiser exploded. You can go and watch that. It is on CCTV, but I won't show it to you. But anyway, a high-ranking Russian military official officer was blown up in his car. Deputy head of the radio center, the 89th Satellite Communication Center, the Russian Armed Forces, Andrew Torgashev, was blown up in his Land Cruiser. Yes, in a parking lot in Moscow. So the Ukrainians, one presumes, are still able to have an effect on the Russian armed forces deep within Russia in Moscow, and they still are carrying out these attempted assassinations. Right. Distant strikes now. So Ukrainian air defense shot down 8 reconnaissance drones, 17 out of 23 Shahed drones, 0 out of 1 Iskander-M, 0 out of 1 of unknown type of missile. So that's fairly okay interception rates. Actually 6 out of 23. It's almost a quarter. That's a slight downtick from what we have seen previously. And I think there has been some attention, particularly on, Kharkiv with S-300s. So those are the surface-to-air missile systems that are used in a ground attack mode. Now, what's interesting here is that's the first time I've heard S-300s be used against Kharkiv since the beginning of the Kharkiv offensive from the Russians, where S-300s were targeted across the border by HIMARS strikes and whatnot, and they lost those air defense systems. I imagine the Ukrainians are going to be searching very intently for the S-300 missile system that sent these, and I can't imagine that's going to last much longer. Sometimes the Russians do things that I just think is bizarre. Like if you've lost a bunch of S-300s because you've been firing them indiscriminately into Kharkiv, right? And then, the Ukrainians come along and they make a really big job of taking them out. And you get to a point where you're drafting S-300s and S-400s from everywhere that you can, so you're degrading your own internal air defense coverage, and you're bringing the only S-500 you can that might well have been blown up already down in Crimea. And you're trying to put these sticking plasters on your air defense systems as they stretch across the occupied territories of Ukraine. Then to okay, let's get another S-300. Yeah, let's put it around in Belgorod again and throw some more missiles at Kharkiv. Would you do that? Like, is that is that the best use of the S300s that you are struggling to, get? Full stop. I don't know. It just strikes me as a bit bizarre. So one person was killed in separate strikes on a private house where there was a fire, non-residential building in the Nemishlian district. 5 cars were also damaged in an industrial zone. So yeah, possibly not the greatest use of S300s, but I don't fancy the chance of that S300 lasting much longer. Then Odessa and Izmail. So Izmail is a port on the Danube River, south of Odessa, on the Black Sea. The missile strikes last night and drone strikes, I think, were at least partially at Odessa. It got a lot of attention. 5-story building, apartment block was hit. You never know whether that's a direct hit or whether that's an air defense missile thrown, an air defense missile, or a drone, or a cruise missile, ballistic missile thrown off course by electronic warfare, air defense, or whatever. But Odessa certainly got some attention, and also supposedly a drone landed in Romania as well and exploded in a Romanian village of Plauru. Many people are reporting. So yeah. There are a lot of activity in Odessa. The occupiers attacked Izmail at night. Port infrastructure was damaged. There's also a hit to a 5-story house. During the night, Ukraine shot down 17 out of 23, and S300s in Kharkiv. So that's your summary there. There also, James Waterhouse here says, whirring generators under darkness in central Dnipro. He's BBC reporter, I think, James Waterhouse, often with his blue helmet on. So whirring generators under darkness in central Dnipro. Power is turned on for 2 hours and then off for 7 here. Russia has been targeting infrastructure since the spring, and blackouts are the worst I've seen in Ukraine. Not that anything particularly has happened to Dnipro in the last however many hours, but this is just a general comment that the energy infrastructure has been definitely compromised, that the Russians have been really successful in hitting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Interestingly, DTEK came out and reckoned they'd get 60-70% of their energy output back online by the end of the year, was it? That would be amazing as one of the big private energy producers. But it is definitely a challenge for many Ukrainians. Now, going on to previous strikes where we're starting to get more and more information out, Ukraine targets a Russian Su-57 base. And now, a Su-57 base was targeted previously in the war. I don't know if it's the Astrakhan one. But anyway, on the morning of July the 24th, early in the morning. Oh, so this is actually from last night. I thought this was from yesterday. But no, so there you go. A Su-57 base has been targeted. Don't know whether it was successfully hit. That just looks like one of the Lyuti attack drones flying nearby. The ferry, though, this is what did happen not last night but the night before, where you had that possibly railway ferry that crosses the Kerch Strait hit by the Ukrainians. The Slavyanin ferry used by the Russians in the port of Kavkaz has been significantly damaged by Ukrainian defense forces. The ferry was used for transporting railway wagons, vehicles and containers for military purposes. It's the third and last railway ferry Russia had in the region. And that's exactly what I said yesterday. This is super, that one hit there is super important. That now probably means that the Russians cannot transport railway equipment or equipment by railway across the Kerch Strait now, given that the weight restrictions are still in place, I think, for railway transport across the fixed Kerch Bridge, but it's not fully fixed, and so it'd be mainly doing it by ferry. And they only had 3 railway ferries. These are not things that you can pick up off eBay, right? So very niche logistical vehicles, and all of them have been taken out now. I don't know whether the previous ones hits were reparable, to be honest. Repairable. Max24 again says Ukrainian drones attacked Akhtubinsk, Astrakhan region, where a military airfield and a flight test center are located. One drone hit the territory of a military unit, and that was from last night. So this is why I'm getting, because Astrakhan, this Lyuti is Astrakhan, and that's why I thought it was yesterday, but it says early in the morning, so maybe twice they've been, or multiple times, they've been aiming at this airbase. I guess this sort of thing probably happens more than we realise. It's only when we get footage of these drones coming out that we know that it's taken place. Now, if you remember yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I reported the Russians hitting a Ukrainian railway. And they claimed that they killed 240 Ukrainian soldiers and that they're taking out all sorts. Keep in mind that the Russian Telegram claimed to have destroyed BRM, don't know quite what that is even, anti-tank rockets, BTR-7s, BREMs and mortars, along with many Max Pros. So those are mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, or APCs. According to the OP, the pictures were taken during cleaning of the site, but of course, all these claims are fairy tales, the Russian claims that is. Okay, so what do we know from that strike? Well, I did not post anything about the attack previously as there was not much visible, but since we got aftermath, I'll quote the Lost Armor tweet. That's the Lost Armor is a Russian war spotting, or the Russian Oryx, and they are somewhat inaccurate. It seems that one truck and at least 2 freight cars were destroyed by the missile strike, the Iskander-M missile strike. So actually, that's really not a lot of damage. And that's why I said, when you have even big missile strikes on a very long train, you're unless there's flammable stuff right along that train, you are going to do some very immediate damage to things here. But it's quite, if that's an expensive missile, it's a linear. It's okay. They're going to be quite close to each other, but in terms of effectiveness of a strike, it's not going to be like hitting a car park where all things might be parked really close together and you can just get in the middle of an array of equipment. This is a line of equipment, and it means that actually you can often get away with not losing all that much with a big missile strike. And that's what I said, and that appears to be the evidence that actually not a lot has been destroyed. Along with this, one GAZ-66 truck with a mounted Zu-23 anti-aircraft gun was destroyed, which isn't, that's not a high-valued bit of kit at all. It was visibly not able to detect and destroy the drone which was hanging above and adjusting the strike. The lack of missile SHORAD, short-range air defense, and detection continues. RPG munitions can be seen as well, but it's certainly not, I think, the damage that the Russians have claimed. And as I said at the time, how you can know that there'll be 240 people in those. I mean, the footage was terrible. It was at night, and it was just highly unlikely that the Russians were being truthful. Right, the UK Defence Intelligence. Oops, I don't know what is in there. Defence Intelligence. Oh no, it is linking. That's okay. Update says this. Open source reporting highlights that on the 7th of July 2024, so this is going back a few weeks, Ukrainian forces conducted a drone strike against a Russian ammunition storage depot near Sergeyka in the Voronezh Oblast. This attack resulted in the near total destruction of ammunition and equipment stored in open bermed areas, as well as buildings located at the facility. So berms are kind of like semi-dug in with mounds at the side. This is a significant loss of a depot that reportedly covered approximately 9 square kilometres. I mean, that's a huge area. The depot was highly likely storing a mixture of surface-to-surface munitions, as well as small arms to be used by personnel on the front lines. If you remember, I showed you footage of this huge smoke plume, like massive. It was a huge explosion here, and they were talking about surface-to-surface missiles and all sorts of other things being there, as well as small lines to be used by personnel on the front lines. This will further stretch Russia's already struggling logistics chains and force yet more dispersals due to the continued threat of Ukrainian strikes. This incident, so dispersals means that instead of having a big depot like that, you have to have lots and lots of smaller depots to make sure that if something is struck, that less stuff is destroyed at any given time. But it's just less efficient. This incident further highlights Russia's continued inability to protect key locations in an area that boasts a densely layered air defense posture, some 80 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Such shortcomings are almost certainly see further losses to other well-planned Ukrainian strikes. They say Russia can ill afford such losses considering the attritional warfare strategy it has adopted, which shows little regard for the lives of soldiers. This approach requires huge amounts of ammunition. Russia is now relying on its limited foreign partners for this supply due to its something frontline demand, unfortunately. You can't read it. But yeah, good stuff there. Now, according to Zelensky, and again it's from Max24, I've criticised him and then quoted him like 58 times. Ukraine is getting closer to the possibility of using its own missiles, and over time should achieve maximum defence independence. I have been waiting. So they are using things like Neptune missiles very sparingly, and occasionally something big happens, like maybe a ship gets hit in Sevastopol or something like that, and people would say, "Oh, that was probably a Neptune." And you're like, why aren't they using these all the time? And I believe I did hear a rumor that they're only able to produce one or two of those a month. Right, so it's like frustrating because Neptune missiles appear to be very successful, and they just need to scale that up. Now, it could be that the Russians have hit munitions factories that make these things, and that's made it very difficult. But it's interesting that Zelensky says that they're getting closer to the possibility of using its own missiles over time should achieve. So how long? What are the obstacles for Ukraine being able to use these on a wide scale basis? So they talked previously about having 1,000-kilometer range on missiles, that they have got that ability, but it could just be that they can't produce many of them. It could be, as I mentioned, that a factory has been hit by the Russians in Lviv or something. Now, the ability to produce these at scale would overcome the issue of not being able to use ATACMS to strike air bases in Russia. But goodness me, it has to be top of the agenda for the Ukrainian industrial military complex. Okay, Ukraine's military intelligence agency was responsible for, moving on to other bits and pieces, for a cyber attack that caused outages across a variety of sectors in Russia. An agency source confirmed to the Kyiv Independent today. So there have been continued cyber attacks. It's part of warfare. I was explaining to someone yesterday, actually, that I was saying, look, we are at war. And because he was saying, look, I think it's actually a guy that's helping paint. I can't get up ladders particularly anymore, so there's a guy helping to paint some of the stuff around the house that I can't do. And I was saying to him yesterday that he was saying, I was reading that I think there could be World War III with China and Russia. I say, mate, my opinion is that we're in World War III now. It's just you don't realise that all these areas are areas of war. And one of those is cyber warfare. We are being attacked at the moment. Our hospitals are being attacked by Russian hackers, right? And the Ukrainians here are showing that this is a very important element to warfare. You've got cyber warfare, information warfare, conventional warfare, financial and economic warfare, political warfare. All of these things are taking place where both sides, and by sides I mean Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, against the collective West, apart from Hungary and Slovakia, people are taking sides and they're using all of these things. It's not always about conventional warfare. Anyway, my opinions on that. So the Ukrainians are having some joy in that sector. Now, this is interesting. The Russian missile strikes that have crippled Ukraine's grid have created an existential need to move energy production away from large facilities that have become targets for Russian attacks, writes Andrea Yanuta. Right, you have power or you don't. Ukraine's energy crisis drives power decentralization. This is exactly what I said, I don't know, a year ago, maybe more, that Ukraine really needs to decentralize its power and get things like solar power. Now, and wind power. That is not like me trying to be all green and renewables, although I'm really into renewables. Okay. So there is that element, but actually just from a security point of view and for a sustainable point of view, as in not environmental sustainability, but like network sustainability, you need to get houses, you need to have some big project to get as many places you can operating with solar panels and wind turbines that you can't then blow up. You have to blow up everyone's houses, or a smaller arrays or a single turbine creating power for this village. Like that is a way of then not drawing from central power, so that if you have less central power, then the power that you do have can go to big industrial needs, right? yes, it takes years, takes a long time, but had you put this in place like 2 years ago, you'd be in a place now where there wouldn't be such a draw on these centralized distribution networks and production. So it's interesting that people are talking about this. This is a viable way for Ukraine to mitigate against these strikes on the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Yes, of course it's not going to replace. Like, you're not going to have some solar panels on top of a bloody Neptune missile manufacturing facility. Like, that's not going to do it. Although, it could still keep certain things running if you get a power cut. I would advise that everyone goes for some kind of version of energy independence, just to help out. Anyway, there you go. Now, talking about energy and food and whatnot, the more, Sevastopol, another load of angry people sent a video appeal to Putin. Quote, workers have nothing to feed their families with. All hope for justice has disappeared. Say builders who constructed dormitories for Sevastopol University who have not been paid for 3 months there. You've got people complaining about food and water, or certainly water lacks. And here Chris Owicki's done a thread. Despite searing temperatures of up to 40 degrees Celsius, Russian fighter pilots in Ukraine and southern Russia are reportedly being issued with only 1 litre of water per day. In between sorties, they're said to be driving around nearby villages begging for water. Fighter Bomber Telegram channel, so this is a reliable one, has published a despairing post complaining about a chronic shortage of drinking water for Russian pilots stationed at forward airfields. The author writes, the guys have been fighting for from forward airfields for several months, and for several months everything has been bad with food. You can say it doesn't exist. If with dry rations everything was solved after a time, then with water everything turned out to be difficult. It turns out that pilots are not allowed water. None. After the intervention of those who didn't give an F, within a day, the issue with rations was essentially resolved and a water issue was partially resolved. A water standard has appeared. 1 litre of water per day per person. When not flying combat missions, pilots are, so that's a partial resolution there. Pilots are forced to drive around the surrounding villages in search of water. It should be noted that the US National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine has determined that an adequate daily fluid intake is about 3.7 litres of fluids per day. In very hot temperatures, more water is likely to be needed or dehydration will result. The channel, says Chris Owicki, appeals to Russian bottled water manufacturers to deliver water to the nearest military airfield this is Voronezh, Rostov, and any military airfield in Crimea, wherever is more convenient for you. Water is 1.5 litre in 1.5 litre bottles is more convenient, but we'll take any. The south of Ukraine and Russia are currently experiencing very high temperatures and severe drought. The Kakhovka Dam's destruction in June 2023 has cut off most of the water supply to Crimea. And then, we talk about nettle soups being made and problems for Russian troops. It's an issue right across the front lines, as well as behind the front lines and forward operating air bases. Absolutely incredible. Deep State says the operational tactical situation on the Pokrovsk front, so Avdiivka sort of area, became critical over the weekend after Ukrainian infantry brigade holding Prokhoretsk conducted a chaotic retreat. The post suggested they were not trained properly. The 47th Mechanized Brigade responded. They always seem to come to the rescue of everyone, but could not hold the town due to a lack of infantry. Now a pocket has been created north of the town, and the 1st and 3rd Battalions from Ukraine's 31st Mechanized are at a risk of encirclement, but they say there is no withdrawal order. So not going particularly well. And there were rumours yesterday about a group had gone AWOL, and then that left those other groups vulnerable from the flanks. And this is not the first time it's happened. Arguably what had happened earlier on in the Avdiivka area. And just sort of political, but just interesting here. Presidential Office head Andrew Yermak has talks with Phil Gordon. So Phil Gordon was a guy that I said, if Kamala Harris was elected as president in November, he would likely be the national security advisor and would replace Jake Sullivan, and he's strong on Russia, right? So this is potentially really good news. He's already has already held talks with Andrew Yermak, who is Zelensky's kind of like main advisor, according to the presidential office. It's absolutely incredible. So even if she doesn't get in, then it's all a waste, obviously. But if she does get in, it'll be hitting the ground running. This is really, really important. So that is a significant bit of information there. by the way. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I know that's a real long one today. Lots of stuff going on. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.